This is a true story that happened to me long while ago when I was 10 years old. This story happened in a small town in the leafy suburbs north of New York City in Westchester County. It didn't happen at my house, but the house of one of my good friends at the time, about a walking block away from where I live. This is one of those towns in Westchester where there are huge suburban houses set among oak and maple trees. It was a safe neighborhood where I knew the owners of each house by name. The houses were generally quite large, with multiple floors and several bedrooms. The house where this scary story takes place was extra large. It was not the shining hotel large, but it was a large colonial house with 5 bedrooms on the second level. The family living there had 5 children ranging from 10 to the upper teenage years at that time. The night this happened was a dark and cold night. The parents were out with dinner plans that evening, and I was there visiting my friend Byron, who was also 10, and his older brother Jacob, who was 12. These are not the names in real life. It was just the 3 of us in one large house on a dark night during October. I knew this family quite well, so I felt very at home in their home. We were just goofing around that night, playing some games and watching TV. 3 kids in a large empty house. So this is where the night becomes creepy. The 3 of us were in the kitchen with the lights on bright. It was around 11:30 at night, so it was late, but not super late. The phone rang, and Jacob, acting as head of the household at 12 years old, answered, "Hello?" We then saw Jacob get a peculiar look on his face and hesitantly said, "Just a minute," and then did something a bit odd. He rested the phone down on the chair. This was one of those wall phones from the 1990s. I don't think people still use those in 2018. In any case, he put the phone down and just left it and walked upstairs. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to do, but still could have a reasonable explanation. I looked at Byron, and he also had a curious WTF type of expression on his face. We were quiet for a few seconds, and both our facial expressions showed signs that we thought this was peculiar and odd. In a few moments, Jacob is going to be running down the stairs, in a panic, screaming for us to get out immediately out of the house. But before we got to that part, here's what's happening upstairs. Jacob climbed the stairs and went into his parents' room, where there is a tabletop phone. This is one of those old corded phones where you pick up the receiver, hold it to your ear, not exactly an iPhone 10. And there was no way to know who was calling. Jacob picked up the phone and said, "Okay, I'm upstairs. What's up?" A few moments went by with dead silence, and Jacob asked, "Hello?" Then the voice came. It was calm but cold. "Jacob, there's a bomb inside your house, and it's going to blow any second now." Click. The other end had hung up. He dropped the phone and felt panic rush through his entire body. He ran out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and started screaming, "Get out of the house! There's a bomb in the house! There's a bomb in the house!" We saw Jacob at the bottom of the stairs running, and he did not waste any time, heading straight through the foyer and outside, down the stone path that leads away from the house and out onto the street. Byron and I ran in confused fury also. Jacob stopped running when he arrived at the other side of the street on the sidewalk. We looked across the street at this huge house, looking very eerie on the dark night. The house had several lights on, and the front door was open, and it was empty. There was no one around. The neighborhood was still and quiet. It was just us 3 kids, the oldest 12 years old, standing there on a cold October night, at almost midnight, scared out of our wits and waiting for the house to burst into fire. I was feeling chills through my body and chills on my skin from the dark, cold air. Our jackets were just in there, and we could just go get them so easily. But though the house could blow up at any second. Jacob explained what had happened on the phone call upstairs, and he thought it was his Uncle Jerry. But now he didn't think it was his Uncle Jerry. It was bizarre that the caller knew he answered on the ground floor and told him to go upstairs. How could he know this? We thought maybe he told Jacob to go upstairs so he wouldn't have enough time to get out of the house before the possible explosion. We stood there, we waited, we were scared, we were cold. We thought the large, boxy, empty, illuminated house on this dark night would soon be in flames, or that there was a chance it would be in flames. It never blew up, but we were still afraid to go inside, because maybe it would blow up then. Eventually we went to the neighbor's house. The father there didn't seem as scared as we were, but he did call the police. The police searched through the house, and Byron and Jacob's parents also arrived home. I see the whole thing was some kind of practical joke, a prank call. There was never a bomb. We never found out who made the call, and Jacob to the day still has no idea who it could have been, and still says that he at first thought it was a friendly call from their uncle. There are a few pranksters in the neighborhood. Actually, we're among the biggest pranksters in the neighborhood. Still, doesn't explain how the caller knew Jacob was on the downstairs phone and that there was another telephone upstairs. And further, it seems like the caller knew who he was speaking to. Who would do such a prank that is so sinister to a few vulnerable kids home alone on such a night?
My basement has never exactly been a welcoming place. It's unfurnished. There's no carpet and the walls consist of boring, exposed bricks. There's a set of old wooden stairs on one end that creaked whenever anybody used them. Behind the stairs is a storage area that begins about 4 or 5 feet off the ground and goes maybe 15 feet further back underneath the garage. The place is a dump as my brother never cleans it, and the toys and tools and random things are sprawled across the entire basement floor, and that's an accomplishment considering how huge it is. It's not very wide, but for one end to the other, it's at least 80 feet in length, including the storage space. However, it's not easy to see from one end to the other since the water heater, furnace, and other appliances sit conveniently at the bottom of the stairs, to make it impossible to carry large objects like Christmas trees up and down the stairs. Anyways, one night we had some friends over. By we, I mean me and my parents. They had a little girl with them, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and since my brother was elsewhere as usual, I wound up sort of babysitting this girl while the parents chatted over desserts or something. Since the basement had so many toys, I thought it was a good idea to take her downstairs to play. Upstairs was kind of boring for a kid her age. The first thing she did when she got down there was find a large box. We had just replaced our washing machine, so its ginormous box was just sitting in the middle of the basement floor. It was as if I had completely vanished as soon as she crawled into that box. She had entered her own little world, playing house or something. I tuned out for a while to check my emails on my iPod while she entertained herself. And then she caught my attention. "Who's that?" she asked. I blinked. "Who's who?" I responded, confused. "That man, over there, the man in black." She responded, completely straight-faced. "There's no one there," I told her. "That's because he went upstairs," she told me. At that point, I took the girl upstairs and sat with my parents for the rest of the evening, not saying a word about what she said. 2 years later, I had some friends over in mid-February, In Wisconsin, this means that if you were to go outside at night, you would be frozen solid in under 10 minutes. So me and my friends were stuck inside and went downstairs to investigate the haunted basement I told them about. The above story, in fact. There were 5 of us, including me and my cousin. I had a tape recorder to collect audio, my cousin had a digital camera, and the others were armed with flashlights, because they wanted to turn off the lights, reluctantly. So we pulled the strings to turn off the lights, and we sat there in pitch black, but only for a few seconds. A halogen light bulb began to flicker above my head almost immediately. I reach up to find that it was halfway plugged in, but still a coincidence. I hadn't even turned on the recorder yet. So I unplugged the light and turned on my recorder and told my cousin to do the same with his camera. It was past 11 o'clock at night, so it was silent. Absolutely silent. Several minutes passed. We even did that thing they do on TV where you just ask questions to whoever or whatever. There wasn't a single response. So it turned into a bit of a joke. We started making fun of the situation and felt pretty stupid. We laughed for a while. Finally, my cousin's camera gives a low battery warning, so we decided to take the last few minutes seriously. "Okay, I'm gonna count down from 3, then let's have it quiet again," my cousin says. 3, 2, 1. A few silent moments passed. My cousin's camera beeps and shuts off. I turn off my recorder. We go upstairs to listen to the footage, and that was that. Of course, the footage was rather uneventful. We listened to the entire tape, and for the longest time we heard nothing but the sounds of our own voices. Until the end. "Okay, I'm gonna count down from 3 and then let's have it quiet again," my cousin says. 3, 2, 1. A few silent moments passed. My cousin's camera beeps and shuts off. But then, half a second between the camera turning off and the end of the footage is a whisper. "Don't leave." We all stared at each other, petrified. "Who's that?" one of my friends asked. "The man in black," I told him. My name is Masha and I'm 16 years old. I live in a small town in Russia. My father doesn't make a lot of money and my family isn't very wealthy. There are a lot of things we can't afford. One of those things is internet. One day, while I was in school, one of my friends told me she had heard about a new service that gets you free internet. She said all you had to do was connect to their network, which was called free Wi-Fi, and then you could browse the internet to your heart's content without having to pay a thing. It sounded almost too good to be true. That evening when I got home, I decided to try it out. I opened up my laptop and searched for the network called free Wi-Fi. The signal was excellent, so I selected it and clicked connect. My internet browser popped up, and a black background with sinister red letters. There was a message. "Welcome to free Wi-Fi. Thank you for visiting. We don't require any payment. We don't require any registration. All we ask is for some basic information about our visitors. Please answer the following question." There were 4 pictures on the page: a bus, a boat, a train, and a plane. Underneath there was a question. What is your usual mode of transportation? I cycled to school. My father didn't own a car and we could never afford to go anywhere on holiday. I didn't use any of those modes of transportation, so I just chose the train at random and clicked on it. A thank you message appeared on the screen, and then I was able to browse the internet. I was delighted. This was the answer to all my problems. Now I could set up a Facebook account and keep in touch with my friends on Twitter and Instagram. The next day, however, as I watched TV, the show was interrupted by a breaking news alert. The local news reporter was saying that there had been a terrible accident. A train had derailed and come off the tracks just as it was crossing a bridge. Several carriages plunged into the river below, and almost everyone on board had been killed. I was horrified. That's when I remembered the website I had visited the night before. I had selected the picture of the train. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. I mean, what would have happened if I chose the picture of the plane? Would there have been a plane crash the next day? The idea was ludicrous. That evening I needed to use the internet again. I connected to the free Wi-Fi network, and again the same page popped up. This time, though, the question was different. There were 4 pictures of houses: a bungalow, a 2-story house, a 3-story house, and an apartment building. Underneath, in big red sinister letters, was the question, "Which type of house do you live in?" My family lives in a bungalow, and I was about to choose that option when I stopped myself. My finger hovered over the mouse button, but I couldn't click it. What if my suspicions were true? I wondered. It was a silly thought, but I couldn't just take that chance. Instead, I clicked on the apartment building just to be safe. A thank you message flashed on the screen, and I was able to connect to the internet again. The next day, the apartment building near my school burned down. Luckily, the fire had happened during the day, so most people weren't home. About 20 people perished in the blaze. The police say they suspected arson. I was worried. It was starting to seem like more than a coincidence. No matter how crazy it seemed, I had a sneaking suspicion that somehow the free Wi-Fi was causing all these tragedies. I decided that I would be better off if I just left it alone. However, that night I began to doubt myself. The more I thought about it, the sillier it seemed. Was I just being paranoid? How could connecting to a free Wi-Fi network result in the death of over 100 people? Who would ever believe such a thing was possible? After mulling it over for almost an hour, I was convinced it was just an insane coincidence. I took out my laptop, turned it on, and connected to the free Wi-Fi. My internet browser opened again. There were 4 more pictures. When I saw them, I let out a gasp of horror. The pictures were of my mother, my father, my little sister, and myself. Underneath, in big sinister red letters, was the question, "Which of these is your favorite family member?" It started on a Monday morning, when I was in the shower. It'll go away, I thought. An eye twitch developed and occurred every time I closed my eyes, when I slept, or every time I blinked. By the next Monday, it hadn't gotten any better, and it did quite the opposite. It started to hurt. I quickly forgot about the eye twitch, though. Every night would sport the same dream in which I was looking through a giant window that exhibited the empty vacuum of space with nothing but a single white dot floating in the distance. Every night it would get a little bit closer. Because of my dreams, I got little sleep. During the daytime, I had a constant feeling that I wasn't alone, that someone was with me, even if I was in a completely empty room. I discarded this as a side effect from my lack of sleep. By the 3rd week, the twitching stopped. Yet, I was plagued by the reoccurring dream which kept me up most of the night. The small white dot which I once perceived was close enough to see its true form. It appeared to me as the decaying body of a deformed humanoid. It looked as if it may have been burnt beyond recognition at one point, as its arms were charred black. Every time I went to sleep, its black, empty eyes stared solemnly into my soul through the window separating dream from reality. It would appear dormant for the most part, with slow and controlled blinks a few times a minute. Eventually, it would start to take a step towards me. At this point, I would wake up in a state of hyperventilation and sweat, with the feeling of someone in the room, but it was only occupied by me. This night was drastically different. Exactly 1 month from the day it started, the same dream occurred tonight. Yet this night, the thing was in touching distance of the window. It had no more room to take a step, and when the time came for it to move, it reached its bent and deformed arm out towards the window and opened it upwards in a slow and robotic movement. As it started to pull its corpse through the window, I jolted upright in the same state of hyperventilation I'd been waking up in. As I woke up, a series of rushed thumps surged through the walls of my room and down the hall. I was sure now more than ever that whatever infested my dreams made it into this world. I couldn't go back to sleep that night. I was trembling out of pure fear. Something I had not done since the days of growing up, and my creative imagination would form a monster to scare me. I needed an escape from the unknown. So I reached under my bed to retrieve my laptop. After propping my laptop on my bed, I opened its monitor to be greeted by the familiar light that illuminated the wall behind me. I looked down at the laptop's date and time. 2:08, I read. I reached over to my nightstand and plucked the disk for Sims from its case. As I clicked on the disk drive button, I heard 2 piercing screams echo throughout my house, followed by the same drumming ricochet through the walls towards me like an ambulance zooming by a car, and it disappeared in the same fashion. I froze and the disc dropped to the carpet. When I realized what was going on, I closed my laptop and mustered up the courage to get out of my bed. I felt that every action I took would ultimately result in my death. Yet, before I command myself to do so, I found myself standing outside of my door. I walked down the hallway towards my parents' room, trying to maintain discreet with every action I took. But I felt like the thundering of my heartbeat would give it away. I pushed open the door to my parents' room and stared into the complete darkness, which reminded me of the void. I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. I saw my parents, both laying perfectly still, with a petrified look on their face. Overcome with a wave of vertigo, I attempted to walk over to their bed. Upon finally reaching it, I felt for a heartbeat. Both of their hearts were beating normally, but when I tried to wake them up, nothing would work. I deduced that they were in a state of coma induced by that creature. As I was on the floor with tears of terror, I tried to imagine what horrible nightmares that creature implanted into their minds. I have a feeling I might find out tomorrow night. If you're ever in an area of absolute quiet, still your breathing and move not a muscle, after a few seconds you will notice that the silence has a sort of sound of its own, a kind of empty, ringing tone. This is nothing unique. Everyone will hear this, given the proper setting. An informed person will tell you that it's your brain trying to interpret the lack of stimuli to your hearing, and so it creates a bit of a filler sound. This ringing sound actually serves a more arcane purpose, covering up a noise we are not meant to hear. This noise is not impossible to hear, and if you are persistent, you can effectively break the cover-up sound. The next time you're silent and you hear the ringing, shout at the top of your lungs for about half a minute,
Then be abruptly silent. It will be different for everyone. Some will hear nothing different for dozens of tries. Others might pick up soft murmuring. A special few auditory heroes might clearly make it out on the first attempt. What you will hear is a voice that relays an account of events about to happen in the immediate future. It's like a sportscaster relaying the events occurring 10 seconds into the future. As time goes on, you will be able to make out this voice under increasingly noisy circumstances, to the point that it can be heard at any time by just concentrating. Such ability would doubtlessly be invaluable, no? You will be able to react to any immediate danger, relate to people around you with greater ease. No one would ever surprise you. Now, of course, you're wondering what sort of horrible catch this ability entails. Perhaps the tone of the voice is so horrible that it'll drive you mad. Or maybe the voice will only predict your death over and over again. Of course, this isn't the case, though. It's a normal voice. Your ears receive it no matter what, and it's simply a matter of noticing. But there is a danger, for you see, when there is a voice, there is a body, and just like you will notice new sounds, so shall you notice new sights. More importantly, you will be noticed. Bernard Sloane had the perfect family. They were always there, waiting for him when he finished work. Every evening at 7 o'clock, he put out the lights, locked the front door, and went downstairs to the basement to spend the evening with his family. His wife Jenny would be sitting on the couch knitting a sweater. His mother was always dozing in her easy chair. His son Ben and his daughter Emma were usually sitting at the table playing a board game. Little Luke lay on the floor playing with his toys, while little Martha, the youngest, sat at the piano. Bernard would sit down in his big comfy chair and chat with them until bedtime. He told them all about his day and who had died recently in town. He would repeat funny stories and jokes he heard and tell them his views and opinions on any subject that came to mind. They always listened patiently and never argued or contradicted him. When it was time to go to bed, Bernard would yawn and stretch his arms. He would go around giving them all kisses on the cheek and saying, "Well, good night, everyone, pleasant dreams." Then he would turn out the lights, climb the stairs, and lock the door behind him when he went to bed. Middleton was a small town, and Bernard was the only undertaker in the area. His funeral parlor was also his home, and he got all the business there was. Although he didn't have any close friends, he was well known, respected, and above suspicion. Everything went like clockwork. People would bring their dead loved ones to him, and Bernard would embalm them and prepare them for burial. The funeral was usually held in the local church, and the dead were buried in the local graveyard. One day, as Bernard was cleaning up at the funeral parlor, a policeman came to the front door. "I'm here about the periwinkle child," said the policeman. Bernard had a puzzled frown on his face. "The periwinkle child?" "Yeah, Martha Periwinkle," said the policeman. "The little girl who drowned 5 months ago." "Oh, yes, of course," said Bernard. "I remember now." "Well, I'll level with you, Mr. Sloane. The family had her body exhumed, and when they opened the coffin, they got quite a surprise shock. There was nothing but stacks of old newspapers inside of it." "Oh my God," said Bernard. "How terrible." "Now look, Mr. Sloane," the policeman said. "Theft of a dead body is a criminal offense. If you cooperate, we'll go easy on you. The family just wants their daughter's remains so they can give her a proper burial." Bernard was highly offended. "I've been in business in Middleton for 20 years, he said. Everybody knows me. How could you think I would do such a thing? Then you won't mind if I search your house? The policeman said. Bernard's face suddenly turned pale. I certainly do mind, he said. This is my home as well as my place of business. I know my rights as a citizen. I'm not going to have anybody snooping through my private property without a search warrant. If that's the way you want to do it, that's fine by me, the policeman growled. I'll be back in an hour with a search warrant. In the meantime, I'll leave an officer outside to make sure you don't try to get rid of any evidence. Bernard watched as the policeman turned and left. He shut the front door and stood there thinking for a few minutes. Then he went downstairs to the basement to see his family. He opened the curtains and let some light into the room for the first time. His wife was still sitting knitting. His mother was still dozing on the couch. Ben and Emma were still playing their board game. Luke was still playing with his toys. And Martha was still at the piano. Somehow they all seemed a little withered, less like living people than like mummies. Only Martha, the new girl, looked as fresh as she had been on the day she drowned. Bernard let out a deep sigh. He picked up a container of gasoline and began splashing around the basement room. He splashed it all over his wife, his mother, and each one of his children. Then he kissed them all on the forehead and sat down in his chair. He loved them all so much, and he couldn't bear to see his family torn apart. He reached into his pocket and took out a box of matches. He selected one match, struck it, and the entire room burst into flames. "Pleasant dreams, everybody!" he screamed as the fire engulfed him. "Pleasant dreams!"
If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.